The invoice arrived on a Tuesday morning, stamped with the Brookwoods HOA seal, charging me $3,847 for irrigation damage I never caused. I stared at the document through my kitchen window. The morning light made the official letterhead look almost legitimate. Almost. My name was typed clearly at the top. Xavier Adams, 1247 Plumeria Drive. The charges were itemized with surgical precision. Broken sprinkler heads. Damaged control valves. Emergency landscaping repairs. I'm 34 years old. I work as a project manager for Pacific Infrastructure Solutions here in Westridge, Hawaii. I've lived in Brookwood subdivision for 3 years. I know every inch of my property lines. I know what I've touched and what I haven't. I walked outside to examine the community irrigation system along my fence line. The sprinkler heads were indeed broken. Shattered plastics scattered across the grass. Fresh dirt marked where someone had dug around the control box. The damage looked recent. Maybe a week old. The problem was simple. I hadn't been anywhere near this equipment. My work schedule showed I'd been in Honolulu for the past 10 days. Hotel receipts. Meeting logs. Rental car records. A paper trail that placed me 60 miles away when this damage supposedly occurred. I photographed everything with my phone. The broken components. The disturbed soil. The invoice itself. Something felt orchestrated about this whole situation. Too convenient. Too precise. The HOA meeting minutes from last month mentioned ongoing issues with irrigation vandalism. Multiple properties affected. Repair costs mounting. The board was cracking down on violations. Implementing new enforcement procedures. I pulled out my copy of the CC&Rs. Section 4.7 covered landscape maintenance responsibilities. Section 6.3 outlined damage assessment protocols. Everything seemed standard. Nothing explained how they determined I was responsible for this specific damage. My neighbor, Benjamin Anderson, was watering his front garden when I walked back inside. He waved from across the street. Normal Tuesday morning routine. Nothing seemed different about the neighborhood dynamics. But the invoice bothered me. The timing felt wrong. The felt planted. I called the HOA management office. The receptionist transferred me to Quinn Anderson, the meeting secretary who handled violation notices. Her voice was professional. Apologetic even. She explained the damage assessment process. Site inspection. Photographic. Witness statements. Can I see the documentation? I asked. Of course. Everything's properly filed. You can review it at Thursday's board meeting. Thursday was 2 days away. 2 days to figure out what was happening here. I hung up and stared at the invoice again. The signature at the bottom belonged to Quinn Anderson. Her handwriting was neat. Confident. The kind of signature that suggested authority. Something was wrong with this picture, I just couldn't see it yet. The HOA office sat in a converted strip mall between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation service. Quinn Anderson's desk occupied the back corner, surrounded by filing cabinets and stacks of violation notices. She looked up when I entered Thursday morning, her smile practiced and professional. Mr. Adams? Right on time. She pulled a manila folder from her desk drawer. Inside were photographs of the damaged irrigation equipment. Close-up shots of broken sprinkler heads. Wide angles showing the disturbed landscaping. A handwritten incident report dated 3 days ago. The photos looked legitimate. Professional quality. Proper lighting. Multiple angles. Someone had taken time with this documentation. Who reported the damage, I asked. Anonymous tip through our hotline. We get several each week. Quinn flipped through the paperwork. The caller mentioned seeing someone near the equipment around midnight. Dark clothing. Medium build. The description could fit half the neighborhood, including me. What about security footage? The cameras in that area have been malfunctioning for weeks. Maintenance keeps postponing repairs. She shrugged apologetically. Budget constraints. I studied the incident report more carefully. The handwriting was Quinn's. I recognized it from previous HOA correspondence. But something about the timeline felt off. The damage was reported at 8:47 a.m. on Monday. I'd been in my Honolulu hotel room checking out for a 10 a.m. flight. Can I get copies of these documents? Absolutely. Standard procedure. Quinn walked to the copy machine. The board takes property damage seriously. We've had increasing problems with vandalism lately. While she copied the paperwork, I examined her desk area. Multiple computer monitors, stacks of property surveys, a calendar marked with inspection dates. Everything looked normal for an HOA administrative office. But I noticed something interesting. A second set of keys hanging from her desk lamp. Not standard office keys. These look like utility access keys, the kind used for irrigation control boxes. Quinn returned with the copies. The board meeting starts at 7 tonight. You're welcome to present your case then. I thanked her and left. But instead of going home, I drove to the city planning office. If someone was targeting me specifically, I wanted to understand why. The clerk at the planning desk was helpful. She pulled up the property records for Brookwood subdivision, survey maps, utility easements, development permits. Everything looked standard until I reached the irrigation system blueprints. The damaged equipment sat on a utility easement, technically city property, maintained through HOA contracts. But the access point was unusual. It required special keys to reach the control mechanisms. Who has access to these utility areas? I asked. Limited list, city maintenance crews, licensed contractors, HOA board members with proper authorization. She printed a copy of the access authorization list. Quinn Anderson's name appeared third from the top. Authorized 6 months ago. Renewed quarterly. This was getting interesting. I spent the afternoon reviewing my travel documentation. Hotel receipts from the Honolulu Marriott. Airline boarding passes. Rental car agreements. Meeting schedules with timestamps. Everything confirmed my alibi. But I also did something else. I called my project management colleague in Honolulu. Sarah had attended the same conference. She remembered our dinner conversation Monday night. The timing was perfect. We discussed the irrigation problems at Brookwoods around 9 p.m. Hawaii time, while the damage was supposedly occurring. At 6:30, I arrived early for the HOA board meeting. The community center was filling up with residents. Normal monthly attendance. Nothing seemed unusual about the crowd. Quinn Anderson sat at the secretary's table, organizing paperwork. She nodded when she saw me. Professional acknowledgement. Nothing more. The meeting followed standard procedures. Old business. New business. Financial reports. My case was listed under violation appeals near the agenda. When my turn came, I presented mine methodically. Travel documentation. Hotel receipts. Meeting schedules. Witness statements. Everything proved I was 60 miles away when the damage occurred. The board members looked uncomfortable. They whispered among themselves. Reviewed the paperwork. Asked clarifying questions. This is quite thorough, said Benjamin Anderson, the board president. No relation to Quinn, despite the shared surname. We'll need to investigate further. But Quinn Anderson was taking notes furiously. Her pen moved across the paper with unusual intensity. She kept glancing at me, then back at her notes. Something about her demeanor had changed. After the meeting, I lingered in the parking lot. Quinn emerged 20 minutes later carrying a large box of files. She loaded them into her Honda Civic and drove away quickly. I followed at a distance. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove to a 24-hour copy center in downtown Westridge. Through the window, I watched her make multiple copies of documents. She spent nearly an hour inside, working at different machines. When she finally left, I went inside. The clerk was cleaning up scattered paper scraps from around the copy machines. Mixed in with the debris were fragments of HOA letterhead, pieces of property surveys, torn bits of what looked like incident reports. I gathered the fragments carefully. At home, I spread them across my kitchen table like a jigsaw puzzle. Most pieces were too small to read. But one fragment caught my attention. Part of a date stamp. The numbers 03 were visible, followed by what looked like 15, March 15th. 2 weeks before the irrigation damage occurred. Quinn Anderson had been preparing documentation for this incident before it happened. The next morning, I called Detective Jordan Young from the Business Regulation Division. I'd worked with his department on a previous project management contract. He remembered me. Xavier, what's going on? I explained the situation. The suspicious timing, the predated documentation, the utility access keys, the late-night copying session. Sounds like you've got a paper trail worth following, he said. Can you bring me everything you've collected? At the police station, Detective Young reviewed my with professional interest. He'd seen similar cases before. HOA officials manufacturing violations for personal gain. Sometimes it was about control. Sometimes money. Always about abuse of authority. We'll need to examine the original documents, he said. Compare handwriting samples. Check for document tampering. This could take several weeks. But I had a more immediate concern. What if she's doing this to other residents? Detective Young nodded grimly. That's exactly what we need to find out. He assigned an investigator to review recent HOA violation notices. Cross-reference them with board member access logs. Look for patterns of suspicious activity. Within 3 days, they found 2 more cases. Similar circumstances. Residents charged for damage they couldn't have caused. Documentation that didn't match the timeline. All processed by Quinn Anderson. The pattern was clear. Quinn Anderson had been systematically creating false violations, charging residents for damages she was causing herself, using her position as meeting secretary to manipulate the documentation process. But the real shock came when Detective Young called me Friday afternoon. We found something else, he said. Quinn Anderson has been skimming money from the violation payments. Small amounts, spread across multiple accounts. She's stolen nearly $15,000 over the past 8 months. The betrayal was complete. Someone I'd trusted to handle neighborhood business fairly had been systematically defrauding residents, including me. The confrontation had to be handled carefully. Detective Young advised against direct contact with Quinn Anderson until the investigation was complete. But the HOA board needed to know immediately. I called an emergency board meeting for the following Tuesday. Benjamin Anderson, our board president, seemed surprised by the urgency. I didn't explain the details over the phone, just said we had a serious financial matter to discuss. The meeting was held at the community center. All 5 board members attended. Quinn Anderson sat in her usual spot, taking notes as if nothing had changed. Her calm demeanor made my stomach turn. I waited until the formal business was finished. Then I stood up. I need to address a serious concern about HOA financial practices. Quinn Anderson's pen stopped moving. She looked up with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. I presented my methodically. The timeline discrepancies, the utility access documentation, the suspicious damage patterns, the late-night office visits captured on security footage. These violations appear to have been manufactured, I said. Someone with administrative access has been creating false charges. The room went silent. Benjamin Anderson leaned. That's a serious accusation, Xavier. Do you have proof? I handed him copies of the documentation Detective Young had cleared for release. The board members passed them around. Quinn Anderson's face remained neutral, but her hands were shaking slightly. The police are investigating, I continued. They've found similar patterns affecting other residents. This isn't an isolated incident. Quinn Anderson finally spoke. I process dozens of violation notices every month. Mistakes happen. That doesn't mean anything was intentional. But Benjamin Anderson was studying the documents more carefully. Quinn, this shows you accessed the utility shed at 11:30 p.m. on March 15th. Why would you need access that late? I was checking on a reported water leak, she said quickly. Sometimes these things can't wait until morning. There's no record of any water leak report that day, I said. I checked with the utility company. The in the room was suffocating. Other board members were asking questions now, demanding explanations for the timeline inconsistencies, the pattern of violations affecting the same residents repeatedly. Quinn Anderson's composure was cracking. This is harassment, she said. Xavier has had it out for me since the landscaping committee disagreement. This isn't about landscaping, Benjamin Anderson said firmly. These are serious financial irregularities. We need to suspend your access to HOA accounts immediately. That's when Quinn Anderson made her mistake. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. You can't do this without proper procedures, she said. I know the bylaws better than anyone here. Actually, I said, emergency suspension of financial access is covered under Article 7, Section 3. Suspected fraud or embezzlement. Her face went pale. She hadn't expected me to know the specific bylaw. Detective Young arrived 20 minutes later. He'd been waiting in the parking lot for my signal. The board meeting had served its purpose. Quinn Anderson's reaction had confirmed our suspicions. "Ma'am, we need to discuss some financial discrepancies," Detective Young said. "You have the right to remain silent." Quinn Anderson tried to maintain her innocence. Claimed the violations were legitimate. Said any money missing was due to accounting errors. But the lie was overwhelming. The police had traced the skimmed funds to 3 different accounts, all opened in Quinn Anderson's name over the past year. Small deposits matching the exact amounts of fraudulent violation fees. They'd also found her fingerprints on utility equipment that had been deliberately damaged. Equipment she'd later charged residents for repairing. The handwriting analysis confirmed document tampering. Violation notices had been altered after the fact. Dates changed. Damage descriptions modified. All in Quinn Anderson's handwriting. But the most damning came from the security footage. The police had obtained additional recordings from neighboring businesses. They showed Quinn Anderson accessing community property multiple times. Always late at night. Always before violation notices appeared. She'd been systematically damaging irrigation systems, fence panels, and landscaping. Then charging residents for the repairs. Using her position as meeting secretary to process the violations without proper oversight. The Financial Crimes Division calculated the total theft at $18,400, spread across 27 fraudulent violations over 8 months. Quinn Anderson was arrested on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and criminal mischief. The HOA immediately suspended her from all positions. Her access to community accounts was terminated. But the damage extended beyond money. Trust in the HOA system was shattered. Residents questioned every violation notice they'd received, every fee they'd paid, every decision the board had made. Benjamin Anderson called a community-wide meeting for the following Saturday. Nearly every household attended. The anger was palpable. "We're implementing immediate reforms," he announced. "All violation notices will require 2-person verification. Financial transactions will need board approval. And we're hiring an independent auditing firm." The reforms were necessary, but they couldn't undo the betrayal. Neighbors who'd served together on committees for years now viewed each other with suspicion. I found myself in an unexpected position. Other residents approached me for advice. They wanted to review their own violation histories, check for similar irregularities. Detective Young connected me with investigative reporters who specialized in HOA corruption cases. They were documenting similar schemes across multiple communities. Quinn Anderson's case fit a disturbing pattern. The legal proceedings moved slowly. Quinn Anderson's attorney argued for reduced charges. Claimed financial stress had led to poor judgment. Said she'd intended to repay the money eventually. But the keeper was too strong. The pattern too deliberate. The betrayal too calculated. She eventually accepted a plea agreement. 18 months in prison. Full restitution to affected residents. Permanent ban from serving on any HOA board. The money was returned within 60 days. But the community's sense of security took much longer to restore. 6 months later, Brookwoods felt different. Quieter somehow. The constant that had gripped our community for so long had finally lifted. I still walked the same streets every morning, past the repaired irrigation lines, past the mailboxes that no longer triggered anxiety, past Quinn Anderson's former house, now occupied by a young family with twin toddlers. The new HOA board functioned with methodical transparency. Every meeting was recorded. Every financial transaction required dual approval. Benjamin Anderson had stepped down as president, citing the need for fresh leadership after the scandal. The independent audit revealed 2 additional irregularities Quinn Anderson had orchestrated. Minor compared to the main scheme, but they reinforced how systematic her betrayal had been, how long she'd been planning it. Detective Young closed the case officially in March. The Federal Financial Crimes Division used our documentation as a template for investigating similar HOA fraud cases statewide. Apparently, Quinn Anderson's methods weren't unique. I work with investigative reporters exposing HOA financial corruption. The story they published about Brookwoods generated responses from dozens of other communities. Similar patterns, similar betrayals, similar breaches of trust. The reporters asked me to review HOA financial records from other subdivisions, help identify red flags, teach residents what warning signs to watch for. It became an unexpected second career. My project management skills translated well to fraud investigation. The same attention to detail, the same systematic approach, the same patience for document review and pattern recognition. Other Brookwoods residents joined the effort. We formed an informal network of HOA watchdogs, sharing information, comparing notes, supporting communities dealing with their own betrayals. The work was necessary but exhausting. Each case reminded me of those months when I'd questioned everything, when every violation notice felt like a personal attack, when trust seemed impossible to rebuild. But slowly, Brookwoods healed. New residents moved in without knowing the full history. Children played in the common areas again. The community garden flourished under new management. Quinn Anderson served her sentence at the minimum security facility in Honolulu. I never saw her again after the sentencing hearing. Never wanted to. The house repairs were completed months ago. The irrigation system worked perfectly. The landscaping had grown back fuller than before. Sometimes I stood in my backyard and remembered that first morning. The damaged sprinkler heads. The confusion. The growing suspicion that something wasn't right. The investigation had consumed 8 months of my life. Changed how I viewed community leadership. Changed how I approached trust itself. But it also connected me with people I'd never have met otherwise. Residents who'd suffered similar betrayals. Reporters fighting for accountability. Investigators working to protect communities from financial predators. The work continued. Other cases. Other communities. Other betrayals to expose and resolve. But Brookwoods was quiet now. The morning walks were peaceful again. The HOA meetings were boring in the best possible way. I kept the case files in a locked cabinet. Of how quickly trust could be shattered. And how much work it took to rebuild. The silence in our neighborhood wasn't empty anymore. It was earned through months of investigation, confrontation, and healing. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.